Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birkin Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birkin.
Happy spring! Outside, birds are chirping, leaves are turning green, and it's 990 season.
Yeah, I think our clients would agree that one of those things is not as exciting as all of the rest here in Minnesota.
Come on.
I know, taxes, spring, same level playing field. But since it is 990 season, I've got some 990 listener questions for you today.
Awesome.
But first of all, Jess, what can you tell us about 990s?
All right. So even if you're part of a nonprofit already, you might actually not know much about the 990 because you might not be the one preparing it. So let's do a little explainer up top. That's a good idea. The 990 is the nonprofit's annual income tax form. And you're thinking, but I thought nonprofits don't pay income tax, Jess. Well, they don't, but the IRS still needs a way to see into your nonprofit's financials and your operations and make sure the nonprofit is doing a good job of taking care of all your donors' funds and not spending it on beer and pool parties. So generally, what 990 you file, there are several forms, and which one you file depends on the size of your organization or what kind of charity you are. So capital F foundations that give out money, they probably file a 990 PF for foundations. Really, really tiny orgs that have gross revenue less than 50 grand in a given year, they'll file a 990N. Then if you're a little bit bigger than that, you'd file a 990 EZ. Or if you have lots of money and assets, then you file the full form 990, replete with all schedules and fancy attachments.
Okay, awesome. So thank you for the overview. Are you ready for our first question?
I am ready.
All right, let's do it. I am the executive director for a small nonprofit that works to improve access to education in our area. Our board recently got an email from a former donor, asking very specific questions about our 990 filings. He'd been picking through our filed returns, looking at the different line item amounts. He said he thinks that we're preparing our 990 wrong and that we look bad to all our funders.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. We've worked with a local CPA for years, and we've never had any issues with any of our 990s. I'm wondering if he's looking at our 990 because he wants to make a big gift, or maybe he's just being a pest. We responded with some reassurance, but he came back to us and offered to take over for our CPA firm and prepare our 990s for us, instead citing his volunteer services for other groups doing this. How can we tell if his complaints about our 990 are valid, and what's the best way to communicate with him about this?
You gotta love anybody that's not a CPA that sees a CPA's filing at the bottom of a tax form and thinks they can do a better job. That takes some cojones,
It's a certain kind of person, for sure.
This one is a little bit of a doozy. So this executive director has to do a real delicate dance here. Because on the one side, you don't want to make the potential donor or the past donor or your constituent mad or upset. You don't want to be offending them, especially if they think, well, maybe this person's, investigating our 990 because they want to give us a legacy gift. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, certainly. But on the other hand, boundaries, right? Like, this is really none of their business. And it's a little intrusive and weird that they're sending emails, making all these comments and telling them that they could do it better than the CPA. That's an, so it's a little bit of a boundaries violation potentially based on what the facts are here. But that said, what's coming to me with this is a good opportunity to actually review your 990 work. I mean, maybe your CPA is not doing it right. And probably you wouldn't know if they weren't, right? I'm not a CPA. I don't fill out 990s. I know some things to look for and watch for. But certainly, I'm a lawyer. I'm a words person, not a numbers person. So most boards probably just look at the 990 and go, yeah, okay, that looks good. So are they doing it right? That's a valid question. So that's the numbers piece. But then the next piece is, are you actually using the written answer portions and the schedules to really explain to your donors how the organization does its work? And, if you're in the sector, you've heard this a million times. The 990 is a communications tool, first and foremost. Yes, it is communicating a lot of financial data, but there are also lots of narrative sections where, depending on your CPA's knowledge and wisdom about making a good 990, they may or may not be filling those out in a way that reassures donors and funders about what you do and how you spend your money. So if your CPA is kind of only interested in counting the beans, then remember that you're the final stop before the filing, and it's okay to send it back or suggest edits or add things if their answer is like one sentence and it should be 3 paragraphs. That's for you and your board to make sure that you're doing that. And then, like I said, also making sure that you're working with a CPA that has experience with nonprofit work, because sometimes they don't. And that can be hard, especially if you're not in a major metropolitan area. There aren't always accounting firms that have a dedicated nonprofit division available to your charity. So I realize that can be difficult, but if you have an experienced nonprofit firm in your area, definitely, check them out. So based on this set of facts, I'd probably recommend they go get a second opinion from another CPA that really does focus just on nonprofits all year round, not just in the slow season. And then they could get a second opinion, put it on letterhead. If everything's good, you're golden, right? And you could even show that to the donor to give them reassurance or build some rapport. And if they say, oh yeah, actually this thing's all hosed up, well, at least and you can thank the donor, for bringing it to your attention. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the most important thing is to make sure the donor feels heard and that he understands that you are taking his concerns seriously. You're getting that second opinion and sharing what your actions are from that. If all is good, you can share that letter, like you said, and that builds that trust. And if he still pushes back on that and wants to prepare your 990s for you, there's really no reason to go round and round forever with this one donor to make him happy. But I think sharing that you appreciate his concern and what you're going to do about it is really all you need to do to keep this guy in good graces.
Yeah. Well said. Well said, co-pilot.
Great. All right. I run a small nonprofit, and I mean tiny. We bring in maybe $5,000 in donations each year. Recently, I got a letter from the IRS saying the organization was automatically revoked for not filing our 990s. But here's the thing. A couple years ago, I realized we needed to file 990s, so I found a CPA willing to help us get it done for free. She assured me she'd handle it, and I assumed that she did. But then last year, I searched for the nonprofit on the IRS's website, and it showed that we didn't have any 990s filed. The CPA wouldn't give me a straight answer about what happened there, so I ended up finding another CPA who could help. This CPA normally doesn't do nonprofit work, but they were sympathetic to our situation. So this new CPA filed a 990 EZ for us, but then the IRS sent that one back for missing information or some other issue. And now, in the meantime, the organization has been revoked. Help, I am so frustrated.
Oh, geez. You just feel bad for, there's my friend Steve Boland, who's a wonderful nonprofit consultant, used the term nonprofit birth control once, and I have just latched onto that as a concept that needs to be said. If you're running a nonprofit on less than $5,000, can you even exist? If you're doing it right, there are actually costs to running the organization. So I feel bad for the people in these situations. So here's the thing. The first problem they have is they made it too hard. $5,000 a year in gross revenue means they could have filed a 990N, which is also referred to as a 990 postcard. And the 990 EZ is more complicated. The 990N is 3 clicks of a mouse and you're done. And the 990 EZ is a full-on, it's not as bad as the full form, but it's full on. It has schedules and you need to do math and you need to know your numbers and all of that. It can be really overwhelming. So I get the urge to have a CPA help you, but you could have just done it. And you can even file a 990N for a prior year. Like there are third-party services that will do that. And if this person had been a Mission Guardian subscriber, we would have just taken care of that for you. We would have filed that 990N for you and none of this would have happened at all. But I digress. So that's the first problem, is they just made it too hard. The second problem is it's all over this question. I mean, you get what you pay for, right? The CPA, says they'll do this for free. Yeah, that's basically just a guarantee that your friend is going to forget to do it, right? I mean, we've all had this experience. You have your buddy take your wedding photos and it's like you don't get the proofs back for 8 months or something because it's not a paying job. It's just going to be at the bottom of the pile. And worse, if they don't know what they're doing, they might fall into that whole procrastinate for a long time to avoid feeling stupid because you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, #relatable content, like I am guilty of that. Totally, right? So you get what you pay for. I mean, basically, this group's going to have to try and apply for streamlined retroactive reinstatement. And depending on how long it's been, they should hurry up because there's like a 15-month window on the easiest version of that. But if their time window for retroactive reinstatement has passed or they don't meet the criteria for some reason, they can apply and get the tax exemption back, but then it'll be as of the date of their application and they'll have this like donut hole. And I don't mean a tasty, delicious donut hole. I mean a gap in their tax exemption status where donations made to them during that hole or were not deductible. Probably most people making those donations don't care anyway, so that's probably fine. But it's just a pain in the butt for this little tiny group to have to go through.
So bad consequences for not filing your 990s, basically. So Jez, what's our takeaway here for all our nonprofits dealing with 990 season?
Well, between these couple of situations, I think there are probably 3 things to remember. First of all, make sure you file the 990, period, right? And then file the right one. You don't need to make your life harder. I see that a lot. I see people making it harder and filing an easy when they just didn't have to. And it's like, you brought in $3,000. What are you doing? So just make sure you file the 990. That's first. Second, running a nonprofit is a lot of work and there are a lot of moving parts. So you should really hire people who know what they're doing to help you manage it. And I realize that's a tall order for some of these really tiny groups, but it is more complicated. That person is realizing now that it is a lot more complicated than they ever thought it was. And so getting good help is number 2. And then I think number 3 has to be the 990 is a communication tool. Like, yes, it's about the numbers, but it also has a lot of space for written communication. And even though you might have a CPA, it's still on you. At the end of the day, you can't just be like, I don't know, the CPA does the 990. No, it comes back to the board and the board has to review it and sign it. So you need to do your part and make sure that you're really communicating through those written parts. It's teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work, Megan.
Always.
Thank you for being my nonprofit therapist co-pilot today.
That's what I'm here for.
All right. If you enjoyed this episode, would you do me a huge favor? Share it with a friend, rate, review, subscribe on your podcast app. It really, really helps us out. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birkin. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkinlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birkin Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.